everybody. Welcome back to the Real Heroes Show. You got Corey here with you as always. And if you caught our video earlier this week, we did a deep dive into Christopher Nolan's filmography, and we were making a top 5 list. It went a little bit too long, so we decided to slice the video into 2 parts. So here is the conclusion of that, where we dive into both The Prestige and The Dark Knight. Enjoy. Indeed. All right, so
we can move on.
We can move on. Interstellar is great. I love it unabashedly. Number 2, since this is a channel that leans into comic book stuff more than other things, we'll close out with Dark Knight. So
Fair
let's
enough.
talk about Prestige.
Yes.
For me, it was my number 1. It's probably my favorite Nolan film. I did toss and turn between this and The Dark Knight, but incredible cast, incredible acting. For me, it was like the movie in between the big blockbusters. Like, it's like almost like he told the studio, I'll do one for you, I'll do one for me, I'll do one for you. And then he went in and he stripped it down, and he went and he did this smaller character-based drama that doesn't rely on crazy action or special effects or anything like that. And it just tells a really tight, concise story. And like, I, as a kid, was just enamored with the idea of stage magicians. I had all those like David Copperfield specials on VHS. I had the stupid thing that Fox did where they had the masked magician like tell secrets because he didn't want to reveal himself and like break the magician's code or whatever. Like, all that stuff was super interesting to me. And then The Prestige came out, and I was 100% hooked. Loved it. I've watched it 1,000,001 times. I can't say enough good things about it. So instead of rambling and looking at it through rose-colored glasses, I'm going to let you talk because I'm sure you have some things that don't work for you in the film, but go for it.
They're minor. I was also torn between Dark Knight and Prestige as my number 1 and 2, and I'll go over the reasons why I eventually picked The Dark Knight when we get there. But to me, it's such a cool duality, because this movie is Christopher Nolan playing a magic trick on the audience in a movie about magic tricks on an audience.
Yeah.
That is,
you said
so
that perfectly.
Cool to me.
That's so good. I've never heard anybody say it that way before, and that's like, wow. All right.
It's great. I mean, it literally, like, Christian Bale looks at the camera and says abracadabra to the audience in the movie, right?
Yeah.
That's what he says, right? Abracadabra?
Or are you watching closely?
That's what it is. Yeah. I mean, might as well be abracadabra.
Right.
But I mean, he is setting up. I mean, Michael Caine in the very beginning is saying, like, doesn't matter if you make something disappear, you have to bring it back. And of course he does at the end. The thing that I love about this one is something my wife hates about movies, is where you don't really understand what's going on until the last scene, and then you understand everything, and then you can watch it again and understand everything. We talk about Christopher Nolan's reliance on his third act surprise, but this is where it works the best, because it is set up so well throughout the entire movie, and then in the very end, when you reveal it, then everything makes more sense. I mean, and it's so obvious. It's right there in front of your face, right? But you're distracted. I mean, it's like a magic trick. He's playing the sleight of hand with everything else going on, that you don't see that it's Christian Bale in bad makeup in the background every scene.
Yep.
But no, I think it reminds me a lot of The Social Network. Those movies are very similar in that it's two people growing up and like trying to put on this show, and then they grow apart and it's a rivalry kind of thing. Mark Zuckerberg and Eduardo Saverin. And then so one thing I didn't catch about The Prestige is that apparently Hugh Jackman's character, the Great
Danton.
Yeah, so Lord Cadlow or whatever.
Oh yeah, Lord Caldwell.
Apparently that's his real upbringing.
Really?
Like I read this that like he wasn't playing a bit in the end. Like, that's who he really was. And like, I guess he, like, his backstory is he got like kicked out of his family or went away from the riches to do this entertainment thing, and so he's going back. And that confused the hell. Like, I never caught that, and I feel like that's explained poorly. my main issues with this movie, though, overall, I know I'm skipping around a little bit, is that while we know what these characters want, Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, I don't feel like they're that fleshed out as characters as much as they are plot devices. Like
Okay.
one of them clearly, like he wants to, they both want to do magic, right? And Christian Bale is sort of like the real talent, right? He's got the ideas.
Yep.
But Hugh Jackman is the marketing guy, where he knows how to make those ideas sing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's constantly about like, I'm gonna copy his trick and do it better. And I'm gonna put it like Christian Bale is not a showman. And so it's kind of like that discussion between like movies, right? Or it's like, you know,
Yeah.
you've got your genius and then you've got your, you know, big blockbuster like studio guy, right? That's kind of like that battle. And I feel like that's really cool thematically, but we don't really know much else about these two guys. Like we don't really know their upbringing. Like I said, like apparently that guy's super rich and we never found out about it. And like, I guess it's supposed to be found out at the end.
Right.
And that's kind of where I lose it a little bit, but again, it's minor because I feel like the plot is so well done that I don't care. Their motivations are clear enough to me. We don't need, I mean, we may need a little bit more fleshing out, but we don't need to know why they're doing the things they're doing. Like we do know that. And I feel like that's enough.
Sure.
Again, the emotional core isn't as good as it could be. The wife character is underwritten. She's just there to be like the "why don't you love me today" person.
Yeah, but at the end, that reveal.
It is a great reveal.
God,
it is an
so
awesome
good.
reveal. But again, it's like I don't really buy their relationship as much.
Right.
There's like that one scene where like he shows off the trick to the kid, and that's really their entire love story. And so like it's hard to buy that. Scarlett Johansson, I mean, I guess it's kind of a love story too.
Yes.
I think
it's a plot device though. It's the typical Nolan.
She's a plot device.
Uses women as plot devices.
Right. Yeah. Both of them are plot devices. I thought Scarlett Johansson actually puts on like a really good performance in this movie.
It's great. Yeah.
And this is before she was kind of famous, right? I guess she was like more under the radar as an actor. Like I think she was still famous, but you know, she's doing like The Island at this point. Yeah, she's like the sex symbol
and
in
things
that.
like that.
Yeah. Where like before she was like being taken seriously as an actor and doing all these dramatic roles because she's such a good actress. Like in Marriage Story.
Watch Marriage Story.
Oh my gosh, she's so good.
Some of those takes are like 7 or 8 minutes long.
Yeah.
And the camera never goes off of her. It's all right. That's a different video, but holy cow.
Yeah. I mean, overall though, like it feels like the hipster moment on Scarlett Johansson, where she's doing a very good dramatic role before studios let her do very good dramatic roles. Yeah. And they should have been letting her do that the whole time. But I digress about the sexism in the film industry. But
it's there, but
it's blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
But anyways, she puts on a great performance. But yeah, this movie, much like Arrival, which is structured very similarly, where at the very end you figure out the whole rest of the movie.
Yep.
I feel like that is what Christopher Nolan wants to do in his movies. He wants you to watch them one time, not really understand everything that's going on until the end, and then watch it again and see all of the brilliance that he has put onto the screen. Yep. I feel like it works the best in The Prestige.
Yeah, I would say you're probably right. Also, David Bowie.
Dude, fucking Bowie coming out of a lightning storm.
What on earth is going on?
It's so good.
It's terrific.
Oh my gosh.
It also, like, this movie looks gorgeous.
Yes.
Costume design is incredible. Like, set design is great. Everything about it, just, to me, it's probably one of my favorite movies, just period, let alone
it's great. Yeah.
One of Nolan's best. But
and again, it was my number one for a long time until I watched it recently and realized that like the emotional core isn't as strong as it could be. But it's just so good. Again, like I'm talking about like minor quibbles. I'm
Like extremely
extrapolating
minor,
things
yeah.
that most movies don't do well at all.
Right.
So I mean, this movie is like a 9 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
Whereas
Which
The Dark Knight is
you
like a
don't
10.
give many 9 out of 10s.
No, this is peak Nolan to me.
Yeah. All right, well,
It's
let's go into peak Nolan then.
all right.
And let's
Yeah.
talk about the best comic book movie ever made, which
Yep.
is 2008's The Dark Knight. This I don't even know if I've said this on the show before, because I haven't done a lot of videos talking about older stuff. We mostly covered current things, but this movie is the movie that like turned me into a film person. I had seen plenty of movies growing up, and I had enjoyed going to the theater, and movies were always fun to me. Nothing had ever struck me and threw me down a rabbit hole the way that this movie did. It's the first movie that I saw multiple times in a theater. It's one of the first movies that I went to go see by myself, because by the third time I wanted to see it, nobody else wanted to go again. But I was so into it that I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to buy a ticket and go sit by myself. And if people look at me like I'm a freaking loser, that's fine. Maybe I am, but I'm going to see the damn movie again. And it all comes down to Heath Ledger's performance. I remember being on the internet at my parents' house when I was a kid, and being on forums, and the casting news came out, and everybody, the guy from 10 Things I Hate About You, that's going to be terrible. What an awful casting, blah, 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 blah. And I use that moment today all the time.
Yep.
Whenever
Robert
any
Pattinson.
casting news comes out and people are like, this movie's going to suck because so-and-so's in it, I say,
it's the same thing with Batman. Robert Pattinson can't be Batman.
Yeah,
well, did you watch him in anything else recently? Because he's great.
Yes, he can. He absolutely can. He probably shouldn't be, because he's probably better than doing comic book stuff.
Probably true.
Watch The Devil All the Time on Netflix. He's a stone cold killer in that movie. But yeah, so Ledger's thing for me is what really throws this over the top. Also, you know, it's a crime story that just happens to have superheroes in it, which I love. It's a morality tale. I
was going to get into that.
The good of people, and you know, all that stuff. It's just, to me, it's as close to perfect as a comic book movie I think is ever going to get. A surprisingly effective turn from Aaron Eckhart as Harvey Dent, and something that I did not see coming in that film was the rise and fall of that character. And it really is kind of
it's in your face too with the coin. Like, we should see that coming.
Yeah. And you know that Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face at some point, but
right.
You didn't really know if it was going to be in this movie or not.
The third act.
You find out that it's going to happen, and you're like, okay, well, how good could it be? And then it's really, really good. I could go on and on for days about this film. I know it in and out. I think I know the whole script, like front to back. But go ahead, save me from myself and wax poetically about this movie, and I'll just nod and agree.
I'll actually acknowledge one of your points about the Harvey Dent thing. So I'm not a comic book guy, so I had no idea that Two-Face's name was Harvey Dent.
Oh,
so
shit!
When I saw this movie,
wow!
And so I had no idea that he was Two-Face. So
I'm jealous to a degree.
Him turning was like a total like, oh, I have no idea that was coming.
Man, okay,
yeah. So like, I guess it makes a whole lot more sense to comic book people if you've like grown up with that knowledge. Then that twist is less surprising. But I'm not a comic book guy, which is funny because I put it number one, as you mentioned. No, I think it's woven so perfectly. It is a story about, again, I talk about the emotional core of his movies, and at its core, this is Bruce Wayne seeing that the love of his life is with another guy. And at the same time, putting that aside because he believes Harvey Dent is what the city needs, right? So he, like, normally a vengeful person would like try and tear this guy down, right? But he is realizing that like who Batman is more important than who he is in love with. And I feel like that is like an emotional core is great. The relationship between Harvey and Rachel, I feel like, is very strong, and Maggie Gyllenhaal gives a phenomenal performance throughout the entire movie. so that emotional core works for me in ways that Nolan's other films, it doesn't. And I feel like that's what really put it as number one for me, is I bought all of the emotion and the relationships. And I know who these characters are. And we talk about like his female characters as being plot devices. Rachel is not. She is her own character. Like, she is actively moving the plot forward and trying to fight against all of this corruption. That's who her character is. And so because she's like, we know her as a character, we can buy those relationships more. So I really like that she's an active character in a filmography where female characters are not very active. Love that. It's also, as you mentioned, a morality story. So we've set up in the first movie that Batman doesn't kill people. Well, what if he's brought to his breaking point, right? It's your typical, like, person is doing what they're doing, like the Pixar formula, where it's like, this person knows who they are, and this is what makes them tick, and then something flips everything. And that's the Joker in this movie. So the Joker is the antithesis of Batman. But then it also brings in this theme, which is really the third act, where it's like, what's the difference between a hero and a villain? And Harvey Dent was the hero until he became the villain. And Batman fills the same role. He was this hero who is, some people view him as a villain. And like, what does that constitute? Can you be both at the same time? And I really love that thematic thread that goes throughout the whole movie, and even the trilogy. Batman as a symbol, right? And Batman means more than just one guy in a suit. And I love that. Like, it's such a big movie, but it's telling these like universal themes. And then, as we mentioned, the morality stuff. I mean, this is probably not. It was probably like more obvious to some people, but the whole boat scene with the bombs on it is like a typical, like, they teach you this in like school as a morality paradox kind of thing, where it's like, would you kill, one person to save 100 or whatever? And in this case, it's like, since they've done, bad things, do they deserve to die more than the rest of people? Would you kill a bunch of convicts to save a bunch of good people? And I love that tension. Like, I think it was Hitchcock that said, like, if you want excitement, they walk into a bar and it blows up. If you want tension, they walk into a bar, you show them the bomb, and then you sit there for 10 minutes. And the audience knows it's there. I think it was Hitchcock, something like that. But that's the typical scenario. You say there's a bomb on both, and you're cross-cutting between the two. And it's like, who's going to pull the trigger first? Well, the Joker is watching in excitement, and then it doesn't happen. It's like this big moment. And like, that's not an action scene. That's characters working it out. And that, like, Batman and the Joker are just sitting there. Like, they're not fighting in that moment. They're literally just watching. Right. And that's the biggest point in the movie, is just characters who really aren't even like explained making a decision. And it's literally just Batman's philosophy against the Joker's philosophy. And I love that. Like, blockbusters should not be that smart. Right. Like, they should be, but they are not. Usually 99% of the time, they are not that smart.
And there's dialogue in the movie that goes along with all of that. There's, Batman asks the Joker, "Why do you want to kill me?" And he's like, "I don't want to kill you.
Right.
I need you. I can't live without you."
Completely.
And then at the end, he's like, "We can do this forever."
Yeah.
When he's just like dangling back and forth, and he's like, the unstoppable force and the immovable object. Right. And there's so much about it where it's like, you watch other comic book movies and it's like, this person is bad and they want to kill the superhero, and the superhero wants to save people, so they have to kill the villain. And this flips all of that on its head. And it takes somebody who's an anarchist and an agent of chaos and literally just like slams him into Batman's world and says, "Are you going to break your one rule?" Like, he literally says, "Tonight you're going to break your one rule."
And if you killed the Joker, you break your rule, but you save millions of people.
It's incredible. And that interrogation scene, to me, is the hands down the best scene in any comic book movie
Yeah, it's
that
good.
has ever been made. The dialogue is incredible. Like Batman is just pulverizing him,
Mm-hmm.
and he's laughing at him.
Yep.
You have nothing on me. You
Right.
can't do anything. And
Yep.
from a guy who his whole thing is beat up bad guys,
Right.
it makes him think outside of the box. How is he going to defeat somebody like this? And he has to come up with a whole new plan. And it
Yep.
forces Bruce Wayne and Batman to grow and for the character to develop. And the fact that Heath died, because I fully believe that the Joker was supposed to be a part of the third movie. I don't know if there's confirmation on that or not, but the way they left it, there's no way he couldn't have been. And it's the saddest thing to me that he passed after that, because I mean, first of all, Heath was a terrific talent. If you watch any of his other movies, you could see that he was like a jack of all trades. He could literally do anything: drama, comedy, rom-com, stuff with comic books or whatever. I love Dark Knight Rises. It's not a top 5 Nolan for me, but I always wonder what would that third movie have been if Heath Ledger didn't pass away.
Yeah, it's a good question, because like it's a generational performance. Like that is perhaps one of the best top 5 villain performances of all time.
Yep.
And we've gotten a few of them recently, like Christoph Waltz and Inglourious Basterds is top 5 for me as well. Just so good. But I mean, like that performance, if you put any other character or performance in there, I don't think The Dark Knight would have as much of an impact. But he just plays it so well.
The Dark Knight is a Joker movie. It's not a Batman movie.
It is, yeah. It's a good point.
Batman is a supporting character for me in that film.
Fair.
Which I know Heath Ledger won supporting actor at the Oscars the year after. Which again, the only 2 performances from a comic book movie that have won any Oscars have both been guys playing the Joker. So it tells you something about the strength of that character, and also I guess the weakness of that character too. Because if you compare like Jared Leto's Joker, which is not good.
Poor Jared.
Because Jared Leto is not a bad actor.
No, he's not. He won the Academy Award.
Right. He knows what he's doing, but depending on the direction you take that character, it can be incredible. The Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie is not my favorite movie of all time, but he is a goddamn tour de force in that film.
Yeah, it's incredible, outrageous.
So man, there's so much good to talk about in The Dark Knight. There are some parts of it that it might drag a little bit here or there or whatever, but like I don't care.
I love it. The ending scene, again, I talked earlier about Gary Oldman's his thematic dump at the end, where it's like he's reading the taglines for the movie. Like that might bug me in any other movie, but like totally works for me. Like, who's gonna talk to their kid like that? It's like, why is he running, Daddy? It's like, because I must explain the movie to you,
because he's a sworn protector.
But I don't care. It's like, and this became another thing that Nolan kept doing, where he's like, you give narration at the end and then you cut to the title card. He does it in Interstellar too, with like the Murph character who we saw, like the old Murph who we met like 2 minutes ago. It's like, it doesn't work there. And
she's also like, I don't need you anymore, Dad. I have my own family now.
I actually kind of like that moment, right? Where it's like, he works his way all the way there. And it's like, that kind of makes sense. For 90% of her life, he was not there. He
wasn't around. That's true.
And so she has built her life without him. And I think that realization is important. I just wish that pivot where he's like, how am I going to find meaning in my life now? It's with random Anne Hathaway. Like that didn't sell for me.
How about just find it with you saved the human race?
Yeah,
still be a rock star, but whatever.
It's like it's a paradox, or not paradox, but like a conflict where the whole movie is built around the relationship between him and Murph, but the eventuality of it is that Murph moves on, and he doesn't really have anything to fall back on, and so you just stick Anne Hathaway in there, and just poor writing, I think, in that regard. But we'll go back to The Dark Knight because I mean, there's not much I can really say about it. Like, you watch this movie, you come away, you're so impressed with it. A lot of people, like I mentioned, like the video breaking down the car chase scene and everything, and how it doesn't match film literature and like the rules of editing. And like when you're watching that scene, you're totally invested. Like,
oh yeah, 100%. And there's like all-timer great like visuals in that middle chunk of the film too, whether it's the semi
like
flipping,
the
money burning,
yeah,
when the Joker busts out of prison and
he's like
all the debris is floating and he's just like kind of jangling the keys at what is his name, Lau, who's in prison, when he's hanging out the back window of the cop car, and he's just all that, like,
it's great.
There's like, as far as not just like movie shots but like comic book type stuff, it checks the boxes for everybody. And
and this is kind of what I refer to The Dark Knight, and this is why to me it's the best comic movie of all time, is because if you took all of the comic bookness out of it, it's still a really good movie.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't love about the Marvel movies, is most of the time for me, if you were to take out most of the comic book stuff out of there, like, I'm not a comic book guy, so I'm not hitting all of those like Easter eggs and insider baseball things. If you take a lot of that out of there, it just doesn't have the same impact. Whereas The Dark Knight, it could be, you know, Darkman and you know, whoever, not based on an established IP, and it still works as a movie. And that to me is why it's the best comic book movie.
It's the Godfather 2 of comic book movies.
Yeah.
That's the best way to put it. It's the best sequel,
the first
that a comic book thing has ever seen. It's the best comic book movie I think that's ever been made. To me, it should be the blueprint for anybody going into something comic book related and say, how are we going to take a character from A to Z and progress them in a certain way that's not superficial, that's actually earned, it's merited, it makes sense. It checks all of those boxes on my end. But
and I mean, we can talk about what do you feel like, do you feel like the lasting impact from Dark Knight was good or bad for comic book movies? Because on one hand, you could say we got the best comic book movie of all time. On the other hand, we got a bunch of duds after trying to replicate the formula. Similar to how I mentioned with Batman Begins, where it's like, you know, my film professor hated Little Miss Sunshine. It's like a lot of people see Dark Knight and they dislike the fact that every comic book movie after that had to be depressing and gritty. Although my favorites are depressing and gritty. Like, probably one of my other favorite ones is Logan. I loved that one.
Incredible.
And
I like a baby at the end of that movie.
And it works for the story that's being told. And I think that's really the overall key, is that The Dark Knight and Batman, like, he was playing off the themes that work for those characters.
Yes.
So if you take that exact same formula and plug it into Man of Steel, it doesn't hit as much, because it's hard to do a gritty Superman movie, because on its face, it's a little bit weird.
Well, and Superman doesn't have any faults.
That's the problem. It's like, how are you going to tear down Superman the same way that you did Bruce Wayne? You can't really.
It's literally an impossibility.
Yeah, and that's why, like, Superman to me is always kind of boring. And it's surprising that it's as popular as it is. I mean, for me, it's probably Batman and Spider-Man are my top two, because they're the most vulnerable.
Yeah,
like, Batman is vulnerable because he's just a normal guy. He's not a god. He's not, you know. And then Spider-Man, he's just a kid trying to figure it out, and you know, he's
a geek.
Also, like, with great power comes great responsibility. He's like a 15-year-old who gets like the weight of the world put on top of him.
Exactly. And the movies, like, Hollywood does this because, like, Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are all very good-looking, baby-faced individuals. In the comics, Peter Parker is a nerd. Like, he's got acne, and like, he is awkward when he talks to people. But then when that suit goes on, then he becomes the wisecracking,
Right.
you know, it's almost kind of like Spider-Man is who he really is, and then Peter Parker is his costume, which is kind of like the Superman thing with DC, where Superman is who he really is and Clark Kent is the alter ego. But
Tobey Maguire, I felt, did that the best of the three. I don't think his Spider-Man was as good because it wasn't as wisecracky, and he's too old. But like, he played the like awkward dude really well.
Right. He was a great Peter. Andrew is a great Spider-Man. Tom Holland is kind of a blend. Which I think is probably why most people like him the most, because it has a balance between the two sides of the character. But we're going off into another video.
Yeah.
Writing this all down. Is there anything else you want to say on The Dark Knight, or should we wrap up this like hour and a half long
conversation? No, I think we can wrap up on Christopher Nolan. You may have to do it in like multiple parts for this one.
In typical Nolan fashion, this is a long one.
You can start with the end and then go to the beginning.
Oh Jesus, I'm confused already just thinking about it. But so I guess that'll wrap things up for this one. If you've made it through all of this, I congratulate you. I salute you, and hopefully you agree with some of the conclusions that we came to. Would love to hear from you. Drop us a comment down below with your top 5 Nolan films and the reasons why. We'd certainly love to hear that. If you'd like to support Shane, you can find him on Twitter at ShaneW21.
That's right.
And then on Instagram at ShaneWarePhoto, which will be linked in the description below. If you'd like to support this channel, you can like this video. Please subscribe if you have not already, and then turn on those notifications so you never miss any new videos, and share it with your friends. If you have anybody who'd like to knock out an hour and a half of their life to talk about one filmmaker and the movies he's made, this might be the video for them. So
I guarantee you have a friend that wants to listen to an hour and a half of movie YouTube, because that's what I do all of the time.
It's a rabbit hole you'll fall down in, I guarantee it. So,
and then like you'll slowly start to hate movies, and then
and then you'll be Shane.
I don't hate movies.
I go to the movies to watch them and hate them. Great. Well, Shane, it's been a pleasure having you on. We'll do this again sometime. And until next time, everybody, we will see you guys in the next video.